She danced on cracked pavement with holes in her shoes, never knowing that the man in the suit who paused to watch her for just 5 seconds would soon change her life forever. The sun beat down on the cracked sidewalks of Hillridge, a forgotten part of the city where hope often came in scraps. Between the old laundromat and the fish market stood a thin girl with wild curls tied back by a fraying ribbon. Her name was Leora May, and she was 10 years old. Her feet were bare. Her only pair of ballet shoes had holes so big that her toes peeked through like shy secrets. But she danced anyway. She wasn't dancing for money or for attention. She danced because her heart didn't know how to speak any other way. The tiny radio her mother had found in the trash buzzed out soft classical music, just enough for her to follow the rhythm. She spun clumsily, but with such aching sincerity that a few passers-by stopped, just for a moment. "You're blocking the entrance again," barked Mrs. Grenville, the butcher's wife, as she came out of the store holding a bag of bones. "Go practice your nonsense elsewhere." Leora May froze mid-pirouette. "Sorry, ma'am," she mumbled, lowering her eyes. She picked up the tiny portable radio and stepped aside to a dusty patch of pavement near the alley, her cheeks red. Inside the laundromat, her mother, Janessa, loaded heavy bags of clothes into an ancient washing machine that creaked like it would collapse at any moment. She glanced through the fogged-up window and saw her daughter twirling alone, surrounded by oil stains and cigarette butts. "You okay, baby?" Janessa called from the door. Leora May nodded and forced a smile. "Just practicing, Mama. The recital is in 4 days. Miss Caulfield said if I do well I might get a scholarship for next term." Janessa nodded slowly. Her lips parted to say something, but she just turned back inside. Words of encouragement had grown harder to find. Across the street, a sleek black car with tinted windows slowed to a stop. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in his late 20s, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. His name was Ashton Wickliffe, heir to the Wickliffe global real estate fortune, and currently the youngest billionaire on the East Coast. He had no business in Hillridge, except to inspect an old lot his firm planned to demolish for luxury condos. Ashton was checking his phone, frowning at numbers. But something flickered in the corner of his eye. Movement. He turned his head, and there she was, a tiny, delicate girl dancing on broken concrete, her arms reaching upward like she believed the sky would catch her. For a moment he stopped walking. The music was barely audible from where he stood, but her rhythm was instinctive. It wasn't polished, it wasn't clean, but it was honest, pure. He stared. Then just as quickly he looked away. "Sir," called his assistant, "they're waiting." Without another glance, Ashton crossed the street and disappeared into a steel-gated construction site. Leora May never even saw him. She was too busy trying to pretend that the clapping she heard in her imagination was real. The school cafeteria was loud, full of sticky trays and louder laughter, but Leora May sat alone in the corner, her sandwich untouched and her gaze distant. The recital was only 2 days away, and while the other girls were buzzing about their new leotards, hair appointments, and which relatives would be in the audience, Leora May quietly folded a crumpled napkin in her lap. It was all she could find that was clean and unwrinkled. She smoothed it out carefully and began to write. She didn't know his name. She only remembered the look on his face, that brief moment when he'd watched her dance from across the street before turning away. There had been something in his eyes, not judgment, not pity, something searching. She clung to that memory like it was a piece of sunlight on a cold day. "Dear Mister," she wrote in large crooked letters, "I saw you last Tuesday. You looked like you maybe cared. If you are not too busy, will you please come to my dance show? It's at 5 o'clock on Saturday at Hillridge Elementary School. I'm not the best dancer, but I try really hard. It would mean a lot if someone like you came. Thank you for looking at me." From Leora May. She reread it 3 times, correcting the letters she'd written backward. Then she folded the napkin into a neat little square and tucked it into a used envelope her mother had once received from the electric company. On the front, She wrote in big black marker, "For the man in the suit." After school, she stood on the same sidewalk where she'd been dancing days earlier, gripping the envelope like it was made of glass. Her heart thumped against her ribs, her palms sweaty. Cars passed. Businessmen and women marched past without looking down. She almost gave up twice. But then she saw it, a black car, sleek and long, rolling slowly down the street. Her breath caught. Was it the same one? It parked near the curb outside the old coffee shop, and out stepped the same tall man, Ashton Wickliffe. He looked tired, focused, talking into a Bluetooth earpiece as he adjusted the cuffs of his suit. Leora May ran. She darted across the street, ignoring the honk of a passing cyclist, and stopped just a few feet in front of him, breathless, shaking. She held out the envelope with both hands. "Excuse me, sir, this is for you." Ashton blinked down at her, momentarily taken off guard. "What is this? I saw you the other day. You saw me dance. Please take it." Without thinking, he accepted the envelope. Before he could ask anything else, she turned and ran back across the street, her braids bouncing with each step. He looked at the front of the envelope. No return address. Just, "For the man in the suit." His assistant raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours?" He didn't respond. He just slipped the envelope into his inner coat pocket and walked into the building, trying to pretend that something about the exchange hadn't just grabbed him by the chest. Later that night, in his penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and polished silence, Ashton remembered the envelope. He pulled it out, unfolded the napkin, and read the words by the dim light of the city below. His hands went still. He read it again. Then he set it down slowly and stared out the window. Something was shifting inside him, something he thought he'd long buried. Ashton sat alone in the library of his penthouse, a glass of untouched bourbon in his hand. The room was silent except for the gentle ticking of the antique clock above the fireplace. The letter lay open on the desk beside him. Leora May's note on the napkin, its edges already beginning to curl. He couldn't stop rereading it. There was something haunting in its simplicity. No demands, no drama, just a child asking, so quietly, to be seen. He rose from the chair and walked slowly to a cabinet hidden behind one of the bookshelves. With a quiet click, the hidden door opened. Inside was a safe. He entered the code without hesitation, 0715, and pulled out a worn wooden box. It was the only item in the entire penthouse that looked old and fragile. He carried it carefully back to the desk, sat down, and lifted the lid. Inside were keepsakes he hadn't looked at in years. A faded pink hair ribbon, a cracked porcelain ballerina figurine, one arm missing, a paper program from a long-ago children's recital, wrinkled and yellowed with time, and a photograph. In it, a young girl with enormous brown eyes smiled brightly, standing on her tiptoes in an oversized tutu, her arms raised in an unbalanced fifth position. Her name was Emmeline, his little sister. She had been everything to him when they were children. Curious, wild, and full of joy. Their parents were always traveling or hosting galas, too busy to notice much, but Ashton had seen her. He remembered how she used to beg him to watch her practice routines in the hallway, even when he was studying or playing video games. She would dance until she fell, then look up at him for approval, panting with joy. She had died in a fire when she was only 7, a short circuit in the heater of her ballet studio. The fire marshal had said it was fast. Smoke, then flames. She never stood a chance. Ashton had never danced again, never stepped into another recital, never allowed music like that into his life, until now. He stared at the photo of Emmeline, his thumb brushing across her face. His throat tightened, and for a moment he pressed his forehead to the edge of the wooden box and closed his eyes. Leora May had the same look, that pure hunger to be seen, that same delicate hope in the face of everything unfair. He reached for his phone and opened his calendar. Saturday, 5 p.m. His schedule showed a dinner meeting with 3 international investors. A critical night. A negotiation that could finalize the largest property acquisition his company had attempted in 2 years. His finger hovered over the appointment. Then with a slow, steady exhale he pressed cancel. His assistant would panic, he knew. But Ashton didn't care. Some things mattered more. He picked up the letter again and whispered, as though Emmeline might somehow hear him, "I think I found someone like you." Saturday afternoon arrived, warm and heavy with the scent of rain that hadn't yet come. Hillridge Elementary buzzed with excitement. Parents clustered near the gymnasium entrance, holding flowers, balloons, and cameras. Girls in pastel tutus laughed and fixed each other's hair. Mothers pinned corsages. Fathers rehearsed where to sit for the best photo angle. But Leora May stood alone in the far corner of the locker room, silent as the others chatted around her. Her leotard was faded purple, too tight at the shoulders and too short at the ankles. Janessa had tried to fix it with extra thread, but the seams still strained. Her ballet slippers were clean but full of stitches, carefully repaired with fishing line. She clutched a tiny rubber band in one hand, pretending it was a bracelet of diamonds. Her classmates glanced at her occasionally, but said nothing. They were used to her silence. She had long ago learned that speaking too much meant explaining things. Why she had no ride home, why she didn't eat lunch some days, why no one ever came to the PTA meetings for her. A girl named Riley, whose mother was the school's treasurer, looked at Leora May with a mix of pity and superiority. "Is your mom coming?" Riley asked, even though she already knew the answer. Leora May didn't respond right away. She just stared down at the floor. Then she said quietly, "She has work tonight." "Oh, are you even performing?" Riley tilted her head. "I mean, you don't look like you're in the real program." Leora May turned to her open backpack and pulled out a folded, wrinkled piece of paper, her name written in pencil near the bottom of the recital lineup. She was scheduled in the second-to-last slot right before the finale. "I'm dancing," she said softly, "even if nobody claps." The room fell silent for a moment, just long enough to feel awkward. Outside, in the hallway, Ms. Caulfield, the dance instructor, paced nervously. She had tried to get Leora May new gear, even quietly pitched the PTA, but was shut down. Still, the girl had talent, real, raw talent. She didn't just follow choreography, she felt it. The recital would begin in minutes. Back inside the locker room, Leora May sat on the bench, legs crossed, arms wrapped around herself. She reached into her small bag and pulled out the corner of a napkin. It was the only copy she had of the letter she'd written to the man in the suit. She unfolded it and stared at it as though it had magic. "Please come," she whispered under her breath. "I know you're probably busy, but if you're out there, please come." The buzzer rang in the gym. The show was about to start. The girls lined up in rows behind the curtain. One by one, they would dance under the lights, spinning and leaping and bowing. The audience murmured with excitement. Phones lifted in the air. Music began. Leora May peeked through a small slit in the curtain, scanning the seats. Families. Friends. Empty chairs. Her eyes locked onto the third row. Seat 5. It was empty. She swallowed hard and stepped back into place. The show was beginning, and she would dance, even if no one ever looked. The second act had just ended when the gymnasium doors creaked open again. Heads turned, whispers followed, and a few gasps broke the quiet hum of the intermission. The man who entered didn't belong here, not because he wasn't welcome, but because he seemed to come from another world entirely. Ashton Wickliffe, dressed in a black tailored coat with rain still drying on his shoulders, stepped into the warm, chaotic crowd of folding chairs and plastic water bottles. In his hands he held a bouquet of white lilies, elegant, understated, far too formal for a school recital. His eyes scanned the room quickly. Third row, seat 5. It was the one Leora May had written about on the back of her envelope. He sat down quietly. People stared. Parents elbowed each other. A few teachers exchanged puzzled glances, whispering, "Is that who I think it is?" One mother even pulled out her phone, discreetly Googling his face to confirm what her heart already suspected. Ashton barely noticed them. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the stage. His heart beat with a strange, unsteady rhythm. Behind the curtain, Leora May fidgeted with the hem of her costume. The thread her mother had used earlier that morning had started to fray. One of her slippers felt loose. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. The acts ahead of hers were winding down. Bright, confident girls in new dresses, twirling in perfect circles to polite applause. Ms. Caulfield stepped behind the curtain and gave Leora May a soft squeeze on the shoulder. "You're up in two," she whispered. Leora May nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Her eyes flicked to the side of the stage. From there, she could see just a sliver of the audience. Her heart jumped. Seat 5 was no longer empty. She blinked. It was him. The man in the suit. He was here. She didn't move for a few seconds. The lights blurred slightly. She didn't know if she was going to cry or run. But then something deep inside her, something small and strong and stubborn, stood up straight. She took a breath. Music began. The act before hers ended with polite clapping. And now a hush spread as the lights dimmed. Her name was called. Not loud, not grand, but enough. Next, Leora May Johnson, performing her original solo, The Light in the Window. She stepped onto the stage. As the spotlight hit her, the world shrank. The whispering stopped. The children backstage froze. Even the janitor paused with his mop in the far hallway. She began to move. It wasn't perfect. Her arms didn't always reach as far as they could have. Her foot landed once with a soft thud where silence was meant. But no one noticed. Because Leora May wasn't performing steps, she was telling a story. Her story. Each twirl was her hunger. Each plie was a bedtime without a lullaby. Each leap was a prayer that someone somewhere might love her enough to stay. In seat 5, Ashton felt his throat tighten. It wasn't Emmeline. It wasn't her face or her form. But the spirit, the trembling defiance in each movement. It was the same. That fragile fire that begged the world to see, to hear, to remember. When the music stopped, Leora May froze in place. Arms lifted toward the light above her, like she was reaching for something only she could see. The room was silent. Then a single clap echoed. It came from the third row. And then another. And then the entire gymnasium exploded in applause. Leora May opened her eyes. Her chest heaved. She blinked against the light, and her eyes found him again. Ashton had risen to his feet, and he was clapping the loudest. After the recital ended, families flooded the stage, rushing to hug their children, take photos, and hand them flowers wrapped in cellophane. The room filled with laughter and overlapping voices, chairs scraping the floor, and the rustle of excitement thick in the air. But Leora May stood alone near the side curtain, still catching her breath. Her chest rose and fell as if her heart hadn't quite come down from the stage yet. She held her arms to herself, unsure whether what had just happened had been real, or some beautiful dream her mind had made up. She had danced, she had finished, and someone clapped. He clapped. Her eyes swept the crowd anxiously. There were so many people, so many legs and jackets and flower bouquets. What if he'd left already? What if it wasn't even him at all? Then, through the parting crowd, she saw him. Ashton Wickliffe stood tall in the middle of the gym, untouched by the chaos, holding the bouquet of lilies carefully in his left hand. His expression was soft, no longer cold and distant like the man she had seen walking past her on the street that day. There was something new in his face now, something open. When he finally approached her, the air around her seemed to go still. She froze. He knelt so they were eye level. "I got your letter," he said gently, holding up the envelope. "I almost didn't come, but I'm glad I did." Leora May looked down at the floor, suddenly too shy to speak. He held out the bouquet. "These are for you." She took them with shaking hands. They were the most beautiful flowers she had ever seen, fragrant and alive and impossible. "Why?" she whispered without looking up. "Why did you come?" Ashton paused. For a moment his voice caught in his throat. "Because once," he said, "a little girl I loved more than anything used to dance just like you. She asked me to watch her, and I didn't always show up. And then I ran out of chances. I didn't want to miss this one." Leora May lifted her gaze. Her eyes were wide, deep pools of confusion and wonder. He looked at her like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible anymore. "Do you think I'm good enough?" she asked, almost too quietly to hear. He smiled. Not the polished, public kind of smile, but a real one, a vulnerable one. I think you're more than good enough. I think the world needs to see what I saw tonight. Miss Caulfield had been watching from a few feet away, trying not to interfere, but Ashton turned toward her now. "May I speak to you about Leora May's training?" he asked. "I want to cover whatever she needs, lessons, costumes, shoes, everything. And more than that, I want to enroll her in a place where she can grow, be seen." Miss Caulfield's mouth fell open. "You mean a scholarship?" "No," he said. "I mean full sponsorship, long term. She deserves that chance." Leora May's hands tightened around the flowers, petals brushing her cheek as tears slid down her face. Her voice trembled. "But why me?" Ashton looked at her with quiet certainty. "Because someone saw you, and now I want the whole world to." The weeks that followed felt like a dream Leora May was afraid to wake from. Every morning she opened her eyes expecting the creaky old ceiling above her bed, the drafty window, the sound of her mother rushing out to another early shift. But now instead, there was a warmth in the air, like something had shifted, something soft and possible. Her mother smiled more too, even through exhaustion, even when bills still came in with red letters. Because now someone had stepped in, someone powerful, and he hadn't asked for anything in return. Ashton kept his word. He didn't just cover dance lessons. He hired a private coach, a retired ballerina named Morel, who treated Leora May like royalty from the first plie. He bought her new slippers, not from a cheap store, but hand-stitched ones from Paris. A trunk of practice gear arrived at their door, monogrammed with her initials. He had even taken her and Janessa to the city's best dance supply shop himself, crouching next to her to examine the fit of every shoe. But more than the gifts, it was his presence that changed her. Ashton came to every Saturday lesson, quiet, observant, always in the corner with a coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. Sometimes he gave pointers, sometimes he just watched, but he was always there. And for a girl who had spent so many years dancing for no one, that meant more than gold. One afternoon after rehearsal, Leora May sat with him on the bench outside the studio, her legs dangling, her tights dusty with chalk. She clutched a peanut butter sandwich in her hands and glanced up at him. "Do you think I'll ever be good enough for the big stage?" she asked. Ashton leaned back and looked at the sky. "You're already good enough. The rest is just time and practice." "You really think so?" He turned to her. "I've seen the best dancers in the world, Leora May, and I've never seen someone dance the way you do, with heart, with truth. That can't be taught." She looked down at her feet. "I still get scared sometimes, like maybe I'll mess it up." He smiled. "Being scared means it matters. You just have to dance anyway." Then, out of his coat pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box and placed it in her lap. Her eyes went wide. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a delicate silver necklace, and on the pendant, engraved in soft script, were the words, "I saw you dance." Leora May stared at it, mouth slightly open. "That's the first thing I thought when I saw you," Ashton said. "Not just that you danced, but that I really saw you. And I won't stop seeing you. Not now. Not ever." She didn't say anything. She just threw her arms around him, tiny hands clutching his suit jacket, her sandwich forgotten on the bench. Behind them, Janessa watched from a distance. Her arms were folded, her face unreadable, but her eyes were glassy with something between disbelief and gratitude. For the first time in years, her daughter didn't look like she was carrying the weight of the world alone. And for the first time, Janessa began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't given up on them after all. 10 years later, the grand chandelier of the Metropolitan Opera glistened like a constellation overhead, casting golden reflections across velvet seats and polished balconies. The house was full, every ticket sold, every row brimming with anticipation. Critics, celebrities, foreign dignitaries, and the quiet faithful who had followed her rise from the beginning sat shoulder to shoulder, programs in hand, waiting for the lights to dim. Backstage, Leora May stood in front of the tall dressing room mirror. Her hair was pulled into a flawless bun, her makeup perfectly blended, but her heart beat just as wildly as it had the night of her first school recital. She took one slow breath, then another, staring at the small silver pendant around her neck. I saw you dance. It had never left her skin in 10 years. The world now knew her name, Leora May Wycliffe, the adopted daughter of real estate titan Ashton Wycliffe, and the youngest principal dancer in the company's modern history. But she had never let go of the girl who once danced barefoot on dirty pavement in front of a laundromat. That girl lived in her still, humming beneath the pirouettes and pliés. There was a knock at the door. She turned. Ashton stood in the doorway in a classic black tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair swept back, his proud smile catching the light. "You ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, voice thick with emotion. "More than I've ever been." He stepped into the room and took her hand. "You've already won, you know. Tonight's just a celebration." "You think she'd be proud?" she asked, eyes glistening. He knew who she meant. He didn't need to ask. "She'd be in the front row, on her feet," he said, squeezing her fingers. "Just like I will be." The stage manager called the 5-minute warning. Ashton kissed her forehead. "Go show them who you are." Moments later, the curtain rose. The orchestra struck the first note. Leora May stepped into the light, her silhouette radiant against the stage. And she danced. She danced as if the world had once been darkness, and her body was now the answer. Every movement was poetry, every turn a cry and a celebration all at once. The audience sat in stunned silence. No one breathed too loudly, as if any sound might break the spell. Ashton sat in the front row, hands clasped, eyes never leaving her. Janessa was beside him, in a flowing dress he had surprised her with that morning. She was weeping quietly, proud in a way only a mother could understand. When the performance ended, there was silence. And then the applause came, thunderous, roaring, endless. The crowd rose to its feet in unison, wave after wave of standing ovation echoing through the opera house. Flowers poured onto the stage. Cameras flashed. The conductor bowed low. But all eyes were on her. Leora May stepped forward, heart pounding, tears forming. And then slowly, she knelt and placed her hand on the stage floor, right where she had finished her very first solo at Hillridge Elementary all those years ago. And as she stood again, she looked out at the sea of faces and smiled through her tears, because she had made it. And the man who once read her letter on a napkin, who changed her life with a single decision, was standing and clapping louder than anyone in the room. This story isn't just about a poor girl who learns to dance. It's about what happens when someone dares to see the unseen. Leora May's journey reminds us that talent can be born anywhere, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. Ashton didn't just sponsor a dancer. He resurrected a part of himself he thought was gone forever. Their bond proves that healing flows both ways, and that when love and belief meet at the right moment, miracles aren't just possible, they're inevitable.